Everybody, video here for you today. We're going to go down and take a look at a place in Iran that I'm sure a lot of you have never heard about. I just found out about this place a couple weeks ago. Put it on my to-do list, but I like doing this, showing sites that really you'd never see otherwise because tourists don't go there. I've done this a lot in Egypt and other areas of the world. Ancient America for sure, but let's go down to Iran today. This is called Tepe Hissar. It's just south of the Caspian Sea, east of Tehran, and it's right down here. Here's an overhead look at Tepe Hissar. They say human occupation here goes back 7,000 years, but the main building happened 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, in kind of the same dating time as the giraffe culture I talked about in April here, the giraffe culture and the chlorite handbag mystery. But this place here, Tepe Hissar, appears to be about 500 miles north and unrelated to the giraffe culture. Here are some of the ruins at Tepe Hissar. Let's just do some reading here on the general history. It says the mound at Tepe Hissar is located near the modern town of Damgan in northeastern Iran, some 360 kilometers, and that would be about 225 miles east of Tehran, and close to the southeastern shore of the Caspian Sea. It was occupied continuously from the mid-5th millennium BC through the 2nd millennium BC, so occupied for about 3,000 years, at which time its economic importance and antiquity derived from the fact that it lay on a major trade route, the Great Khorasan Road, which connected Mesopotamia to the Far East. It says the first major excavation of the mounds were undertaken in 1931 and 1932 by Eric F. Schmidt, who subsequently divided the settlement's occupation into 3 main cultural phases. Here's a story that came out about 3-4 weeks ago. Explore Tepe Hissar with finds from the Chalcolithic age to the Sasanian era. People were living here for many thousands of years. It says Tepe Hissar, which bears cultural periods from the Chalcolithic age to the Sasanian period, is one of the most famous archaeological sites in Iran. Here's a story from about 3 months ago. 7,000-year-old Tepe Hissar to be a step closer for being global. It says a restoration and landscaping project will soon be commenced on Tepe Hissar in north-central Iran with the aim of having the 7,000-year-old archaeological hill prepared for a possible UNESCO registration. But this seems to be a very important site that goes way back in history, a lot of remains, a lot of ruins still here. So I think this would be a logical candidate to be on the UNESCO list. Let's talk about the main era construction here. It says Hissar 1 belongs to the Copper Age, and that started about 3,800 BC. So about 5,800 years ago is when these ruins that can still be documented today got started. It says Hissar 2, which starts about 3,600 BC, so not too far after that, is marked by the appearance of burnished gray pottery and the first objects made of bronze. Among the finds are also long-shaped bottles. The next phase, Hissar 3, begins about 2,800 BC and saw nice metalwork and gray pottery. So there are 3 phases marked between 3,800 BC and 2,800 BC where a lot of these ruins were built. What was here before 3,800 BC? Well, that's anybody's guess if people were here for almost 2,000 years before that, but there are some more looks at the ruins. It says about 3 centuries after the Hissar 3 phase ended, a part of the town was violently destroyed. That ruin is now known as the Burnt Building, situated at the western part of the hill, and is the most recognizable remainder of this catastrophe. Archaeologists have found stone arrowheads and charred battle victims. After this period, the site was abandoned, and there was a hiatus for about 5 or 6 centuries. Then after, about 1350 BC, people returned and settled on smaller mounds in the neighborhood of the ancient mound. Here are a few artifacts coming from the site. Here is a figurine, obviously of a woman. They say this is roughly 3,800 to 4,200 years old, made of alabaster. Pretty interesting piece right there. Here is a water vessel, they say is roughly 4,000 years old. And here is a piece of pottery with some designs on it. They say this is 6,000 years old, and that's even older than the earliest phase of construction for this place that is noted. I will leave some links below, but just reading about some other things that were found here. It says in abundance of small clay and alabaster animals were found. Clay stamp seals with geometric designs were also uncovered, but there is a lack of evidence of imprints of the stamps, leading anthropologists to believe that they could have been just small ornaments or buttons instead. The lack of evidence could also be explained by how hastily the excavators were working. However, one stamp seal of interest depicted two human figures, an ibex and snakes. This incorporation of human figures into geometric and animal designs was very unusual for the Hissar I time period, and that started about 5,800 years ago. But here are some small alabaster animal figurines that were found. Here is a map of the site where they documented the burials, mainly on the main mound here in an area called the North Flat. It says there was 3 different types of burials here. Most of the bodies were buried in pit style, or they were wrapped in wool clothes and interred in a pit. Cis graves, where burials with enclosures and objects buried with the dead are often indicative of more wealth. There were also communal burial chambers ranging from 2 to 28 individuals. Both the cis graves and the communal burial chambers are much more uncommon than the pit graves. Schmidt also identified 4 especially wealthy graves that were discovered, which he labeled Warrior 1, Dancer, Little Girl, and Priest. These individuals were buried with metal weapons, agricultural tools, and domestic utensils, including stone and copper seals. Here's some more pottery found at the site, animal depictions. Here are golden ram's horns that were found at this site. Very cool artifact made of gold. Here is a look from the early 1930s when Eric Schmidt was doing excavation work here on behalf of the University of Pennsylvania Museum. I will leave this link from the Penn Museum below. They were the ones doing the work here in the early 1930s. But here is a look from about 90 years ago at the excavation work done at Tepe Hissar. See some victims down there. Many things were uncovered here, but there is a good look. Here are just a few more artifacts found at the site. They think this one goes back to about 3800 BC. Same with this one, about 5,800 years old. Some symbolism on there, an animal figure, a few other things. This one, a bottle, 5,600 years old. And this little vessel, they think, comes from about 3,300 years ago. Some interesting finds made here. I like doing these videos on early sites in the Mesopotamia and Sumer areas that not a lot of people know about. This is one site that I just learned about a few weeks ago and I thought was very interesting, and it even really got more interesting the further I dug. But I'm sure these people, like a lot of ancient cultures, were watching the motions of the heavens here. Tepe Hissar was originally discovered about 1880, and then 50 years later, Eric Schmidt from the University of Pennsylvania Museum led excavation work here. Pretty interesting finds, that is for sure, but a period of history that spanned thousands of years. People might have started living here about 7,500 years ago. That's a long time ago. And then people lived here for thousands of years. Something bad happened here, apparently. It was abandoned for centuries. But that is a place I had not heard about till a couple weeks ago, so I'm sure there's some of you that have never heard about this place. That's what I like to do. Stuff you have never heard about. Hope you thought that was interesting. You all have a very nice day.